Since he's going to talk about himself, I will say he will give a much better introduction than I will. Abbot Moses was a chef and now is abbot of Holy Resurrection Monastery, which, if you're wondering where that is, it's by the Johnsonville Brat Factories. So it all comes full circle, doesn't it, Father? All right. Thanks so much for being here today.
So, okay. Thank you, Grace Marie, for that nice introduction. Like she said, I'm Abbot Moses from Holy Resurrection Byzantine Catholic Monastery up in St. Nazianz. I was asked today to talk a little bit on my vocation story, on how a young Roman Catholic boy wound up in Eastern Catholic Church and started a monastery. So I grew up a regular Roman Catholic kid back in New Jersey, back in the 70s and 80s. And from a very young age, always wanted to be a chef. I enjoyed cooking. My grandfather was a professional chef. At one point, I enjoyed cooking with him and learning a lot of cooking from my mom. And I decided pretty early on that I wanted to go to the Culinary Institute of America back in Hyde Park, New York. It's one of the most prestigious chef schools in the world. I don't know if I'm getting feedback. Okay. So that's what I worked towards. From about the age of 12, I saw a Christmas special on TV, which was my first introduction to monastic life. I had heard about monks and nuns, but really knew nothing about them. And I watched this Christmas special about life in a Benedictine convent in England in the 1960s. It was called In This House of Breed. And that was my first introduction, and I was hooked. So from about that point in time, all through high school, I was betwixt and between. Do I want to be a chef, or do I want to pursue monastic life? And when I graduated high school, I had already been accepted at the Culinary Institute, but I wanted to make a change. I said to my parents, I really want to enter monastic life. And they were like, not at your age. You do not have the maturity to make that kind of decision. If you do have a vocation, that vocation will still be there down the road. So I went the chef route at that point in time. I followed their advice very begrudgingly. But looking back on it, it really was the right decision. I know that I would not have been able to hack it at that young age. So I went to chef school, graduated, and worked in hotels and restaurants in New York. The culinary world is it's a very difficult world to live a Christian life in. It's very stressful, lots of drugs and alcohol, all the nasty stuff. I think it comes from the stress of always having to get these orders out really quick, and so it was so I wanted to take a break. I wanted to stay in the field, but I didn't want to be in the stressful life, especially in New York at that time. So I took a job as a chef on a millionaire's yacht in Greece. So I went to Greece, and I was a nominal Catholic at the time. Went to Mass on Sunday. But when I went to Greece, I was given permission by the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Athens and the Greek Orthodox Archbishop of Athens to receive the sacraments in the Orthodox Church. The Catholic Church in Greece is tiny. And especially being I was going to be working on a yacht, I wouldn't have access to receiving the sacraments in the Catholic Church. So both bishops gave me permission to receive in the Orthodox Church. And from the first Divine Liturgy I went to, the Divine Liturgy is what we in the East call Mass, I knew I was home. I didn't understand a word of it. I didn't speak any Greek. But just the beauty of the icons and the chant and the movement and the vestment, it just really spoke to me. I was lucky enough that the priest in the parish that I was going to at that point in time, before we went out sailing the islands, spoke English. He had served in England for a number of years. So he introduced me to an Orthodox bookstore in Athens that had a whole section in English. So I devoured everything I could and just fell in love with it. I was touring throughout the country, and there are all these ancient sites that really didn't interest me, but the Byzantine era monasteries and convents just spoke to me. So I visited monasteries. In fact, these were in the days before the internet, so I would take photos on a regular old camera and have them developed, and then I'd write on the back what they were, and I'd send them home. And my mother called me one day. She says, "Is there anything in Greece other than these Byzantine monasteries?" I said, "Mom, that's all I want to see." So I spent a year there, and came back to the States. And I went to my Roman Catholic pastor and I said, "Father, I'm really considering joining the Orthodox Church. I really fell in love with everything about the spirituality, the theology, the liturgy." And he says, "I have no problem with it." He says, "The Orthodox Church, they have valid sacraments, they have apostolic succession just like we do. But before you do that, check out these Greek Catholics." And I said, "What's a Greek Catholic?" And he explained to me, what we really are is a part of the Orthodox Church that came back into communion with Rome, mostly in the 16 and 1700s. And we've kept the Orthodox liturgy, theology. So if you would to come to our monastery, and you would come to like a Sunday Divine Liturgy, it's going to look very different than what we just experienced. Very different. So he said, "Check out these Greek Catholics." And I'm like, how come I went to 12 years of your Catholic school and never heard about these Greek Catholics? And in New Jersey, where I lived, they're very big in the community. There's lots and lots of Greek Catholics. So from that day on, he's arranged it so that the 8th grade has a field trip to experience a Byzantine liturgy. But I did. I went and I experienced it. And here I am 35 years later. Went that route. But shortly after I came back from Greece, I decided it's time to look into this vocation that God keeps tugging at me, and I kept trying to push it away. I was enjoying my life on the yacht, but that draw to monastic life was still there. So I figured it was time to look into it. So I set myself 3 criteria. I wanted to be able to pray in English. I wanted to stay in communion with Rome. And I hoped to be able to do that here in America. At that point in time, there was only one Byzantine Catholic monastery in America. It's part of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, and it's in Northern California. So I went out to join them. things didn't quite work out there. The abbot of that monastery had dementia, and no one in the community was willing to acknowledge that. So life was pretty hellish. I stuck it out for a year and left. I said, I just can't do this. Went back to New Jersey, got a job in another hotel, and decided, well, I need to explore my options. There were a couple of options in Europe. One, 1,000-year-old Byzantine Catholic monastery just south of Rome. The problem there was they prayed in English one day, they prayed in Greek one day and Italian the next. So not only would I have to learn one language, I'd have to learn two. And then there was a monastery in Belgium, and they prayed in Greek one week and Slavonic the next. So again, two languages, and I am not good at languages. So I kept praying, and I kept in touch with a couple of other guys who had come from Australia with the intention of going back to getting formation at that monastery in California, getting formation there and going back to Australia to start a monastery. They left for the same reason I did. So the three of us kept in touch, and we decided, well, maybe we need to start something. So we started approaching bishops. Would you be willing to allow us to attempt to start a monastery in your diocese? And we were lucky enough that the bishop of the Byzantine bishop of Phoenix, Arizona, took us on, and his diocese was the whole West Coast. So we got together, we started praying and looking for a property. We wound up in the middle of the Mojave Desert. The conventual Franciscans gave us a property that they had that no one in their province was interested in living in the desert. So they gave it to us. And we moved there and just started living the Byzantine monastic life. We had a lot of contact with Orthodox monasteries that gave us guidance and whatnot. And it took us about 5 years. The bishop originally asked us, just start living the life, and you can write your rule after you've lived the life for a number of years. And the process in the Eastern churches, unlike in the West, we don't have large orders like the Carmelites or the Franciscans or the Jesuits. Each monastery is what they call in Latin sui juris, self-governing. So we had no support like from a large order. So we just started living the life, praying the services, and doing what we could. And 5 years later, we sat down as a community and wrote the rule that we still live by. And the bishop approved it, and he sent it to Rome, and Rome approved it. And at that point, 5 years after that, in the year 2000, Holy Resurrection Monastery was set up as a fully functioning sui juris, self-governing monastery in the Byzantine Church. So yeah, the three of us were founders. We elected our first abbot, Abbot Nicholas, who led us until about 2 years ago, when he stepped down and I was elected. At this point, we're a community of 8. Our numbers have fluctuated up and down over the years. A lot of guys come with a very romantic idea of what monastic life is going to be like they're going to be able to sit in their cell all day and pray. And, no, everyone's got jobs to do as well, and we have to support ourselves. So that's pretty much my story. 30 years a monk now. I've had the opportunity in those 30 years to I consider myself a pilgrim as well as a chef and an abbot. I've done 3 long distance walking pilgrimages. I was given a break in 2014 and I went to Spain and walked the Camino de Santiago, 500 miles. About 3 years ago, I walked the Wisconsin Way, a new walking pilgrimage that starts up in Champion. And the first main, well, it's a 12-day walk from Champion here to Holy Hill, which is the current destination. Eventually, they hope to build up the infrastructures to walk to from here to La Crosse to Our Lady of Guadalupe. So I did that. That's a 480-mile pilgrimage. And then 2 summers ago, right before I was elected abbot, I was given a sabbatical for my 25th anniversary of a monk. The monastery gave me time off, but they didn't have any money to give me, which is usually the case. So for about a year, I sold my plasma to to raise some cash, and I was able to do a walking pilgrimage from London to Rome, which was 1,500 miles. So I still get to practice my vocation as a chef, because I do cook for the monastery, and we have loads of guests coming through. We're also one of the stops on the Wisconsin Way, so I get to host pilgrims. So that's pretty much my story. Anyone have any questions or yes, ma'am? Yes. When I was working at the Hotel Pierre in New York, I cooked for every president from Jimmy Carter to Bill Clinton. So yeah, it was a very exclusive hotel in New York on Fifth Avenue. Yes. Yes. Oh, good question. Yeah. The desert, the property that was given to us had some buildings, but it really didn't have enough room for us to grow as a community. California, as I'm sure you know, is very expensive. So we either had to build or move. When we started researching building, even though we were out in the middle of nowhere, we were about 50 miles from Death Valley, in the middle of nowhere. They were going to hold us to the same building standards as if we were building in downtown LA. Extremely expensive process. So we decided, well, there's plenty of convents and monasteries that aren't being used around the country. Let's start looking. We don't want to have to build. So I was doing an internet search and I went to a site that was recommended to me by my chiropractor, whose dad happened to be a real estate agent. And the website was called Find the Divine. It was a website that advertised retreat houses, where people could go and take a retreat. And they had Catholic ones and they had Buddhist ones, and there were non-denominational, but they were advertising. And on that website, there was a page of retreat houses that were for sale. And the property that we wound up in St. Nazianz was listed. It was way out of, I don't know, maybe the battery died, or it was way out of our price range when I first saw it. And so we kept looking at other properties and whatnot. We made an offer on a property back in New Jersey that was accepted, but then the financing fell through. The financing fell through on that one, and they wound up selling it to someone else. But every time something fell through, I went back and looked at this place in Wisconsin. And every time I went back to it, the price came down. So it took about 3 years until it fell into our price range. And at that point, I said to Abbot Nicholas, I said, I need to go to Wisconsin, even if it's just to rule this property out, because it looks too perfect. hit every criteria that we had listed as what we wanted in a property. Abbot Nicholas, who was born in Egypt, grew up in Australia, and then lived in Southern California, had a big fear of winter. He said, but it's in Wisconsin. But it's in Wisconsin. Says, let me just go to rule it out because it looks too good to be true. He said, all right. So Father Maximus, one of the other monks, and I, we flew out, and it was just what we were looking for. And Father Maximus, also from Australia and had never lived in winter, was a bit scared as well. But Father Basil and I had both grown up in winter. We convinced them winter is much more doable than summer in the Mojave. You know, you can always put another layer on. You can only take so much off. So in 2011, we wound up purchasing this property up in St. Nazianz. It was originally built, there were two separate buildings. One was a girls' orphanage and one was a hospital. They were built in the 1850s. In the 1940s, they combined them, and it had been used as a convent since around 1900. In the year 2000, there was a microburst storm that came through the area and ripped the roof off of the building. And the nuns decided they were going to leave. They went back to the mother house in Milwaukee, and they sold the property. And this couple bought it and ran it as a retreat house, kind of bed and breakfast place. And they had it on the market. He had gotten cancer, and they just couldn't maintain it anymore. And that's we wound up buying it from them. And that was in 2011. So we've been in Wisconsin now since 2011, and I don't miss that desert at all. I had to go back to California for a funeral this past summer, and I drove past the old monasteries. I do not miss this. So, yes. Although Benedict was founded by Eastern monks, his rule is basically used in the West, not so much in the East. We looked at a number of ancient rules and based ours off of that. So it's a combination of some wisdom from Benedict, Saint Basil is another one who wrote a rule for monks. So yeah, ours is really a compilation of different. Yes, Marianne. Mm-hmm. It's been copied since, and the iconographer has made more of them. But yes, our patroness is Our Lady Searcher for the Lost. It was funny when we were first getting started, before we wound up in the property in the desert. We were living at the Russian Catholic parish in San Francisco, and that's where we got started. They graciously took us in, gave us a place to live while we looked for some place to live, and for some reason, and the community was all drawn to this one icon in the chapel, Our Lady Searcher for the Lost. And for some reason, we were all drawn to that and started a devotion to her, even before we knew that the others were praying to her under that patronage as well. So we had a priest friend in Sacramento who was also an iconographer. And when we were given the property in the desert, he said, I'd like to write an icon for you. Which icon would you like? And we all unanimously said, Our Lady Searcher for the Lost. it's an ancient title that Our Lady um, is invoked under. Um, Originally, it comes from Syria, and yeah, people have been praying it, especially in our icon, in front of our icon, geez, for 30 years now, and the list of miracles that we've experienced, and mothers praying for their children who have left the faith and have come back. Um, it's just been miraculous. We're hoping to have our monastery named the the national site for 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 her. We're in the process of planning out an outdoor shrine with her image in it, and restarting. We had a pilgrimage every year that we hosted when we were still in Southern California. Um, and we would get hundreds and hundreds of people would come out to this pilgrimage every year to pray on her feast day. Um, we're hoping to reestablish that here in Wisconsin if we can drum up some interest. So we're in St. Nazianz, which is it took me about an hour and 20 minutes to get there to get here this morning. The monastery has a chapel attached. It was built in 1908, and that's where our services are. We have Divine Liturgy Mass every Saturday at 9:30 and Sunday at 10:30, and anyone is welcome to come and attend. We have a fellowship meal afterwards that you're also invited to attend as well. But like I said, it's going to look very different than what we had here this morning. There's a wall covered with icons between the altar area and the nave where the people are, and there is a veil that at different points of the liturgy are opened or closed. So you can at some points you can see in what's going on, and at other points you can't. Um, it really started out, centuries ago as just like an altar rail, like you find in an older Roman Catholic church. Um, and over the centuries, it just got bigger and bigger and covered with icons. So yeah, some people see it as a separation, but theologically speaking, it's more of a meeting place. It's where heaven and earth come together, where the gospel is brought out through those doors and proclaimed, making Christ present. And it's where the Eucharist is brought out through those doors and then distributed to the people. So again, it's a meeting place where we meet God. It's not a wall of separation to keep us apart, but a place to demark the holy point and a place where we meet God. Also, another interesting thing in the Byzantine Catholic churches, we receive the Eucharist under both species. We use leavened bread. So after the consecration, the deacon will either cut up or break up the large piece of bread into individual pieces, and it's dropped into the chalice, and everyone receives from a spoon. So the deacon or the priest, you'll come up, you open your mouth, the deacon or the priest will drop the Eucharist into your mouth from a spoon. And we commune babies as well. They're at baptism, they receive all three sacraments of initiation. They're baptized, they're chrismated, aka confirmation, and receive the Eucharist all at the same liturgy, usually at about 40 days of age. It's just an older tradition. Yes, sir. Hmm. To become a monk, you basically come to the monastery and live the life for a number of years. Um, those of us who are ordained, in addition to being monks, will often go to seminary as well. Nowadays, most of that can be done online. The formation, the practical formation can be done in the monastery. So it's just the class work that is required. Um, yeah, and um, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops pretty much sets the standard for anyone being ordained of what the minimum requirements are, and that even though that's mostly Latin Rite Catholics, it affects us as well. Our our bishop, there's one bishop for the Romanian Catholic Diocese, which encompasses the whole USA and Canada. It's a tiny diocese. It's huge geographically, but our population would be the size of an average size Roman Catholic parish. We've got about 3,500 parishioners across the U.S. and Canada. So yeah, our bishop is in Canton, Ohio. Yes. That's a tough one. Um, I think it was more of a just wanting to have a life that was centered on prayer and communion with God. Um, and for the past 30 some odd years, I get asked that question a lot, and other monastics get why you can't answer that question, but people want to know. So that's the closest I can come to just a real desire to commune with God. Our bishop, and being his diocese is the whole U.S. and Canada, he had no problem. We're actually not much closer to him now, so he gets to come and visit us more often. Correct. We use iconography. Not that we have anything against statues. Um, you'll find before the iconoclastic heresy in the 6th or 7th century, you there were lots of statues in the East. They were all destroyed. It was much easier to hide icons. Um, so they just never made a reappearance in the East. The icon became the norm. Correct. A shadow, if there is a shadow, it's usually pertaining to something evil. If for some reason Satan is portrayed, you'll see him in profile, not face on, um, and under a shadow. Our daily life, um, in our monastery, we start with matins every morning at 6 o'clock, followed by the first hour, and we finish at about 7:30. Then all the monks go to their cells and have an hour and a half of private prayer. About 9 o'clock, we start our day um, with whatever work needs done. Like I said, I'm the cook. I also do all the shopping and a lot of the banking. And so we've all got those mundane tasks. The monastery, one of the ways we support ourselves is we sell coffee. So someone's packaging up the orders that come in and shipping them out. We also run a retreat house. So we have a constant flow of guests coming and going. So the the rooms need made up, beds made, all of that kind of stuff. Um, so we come together again as a community at noon, and we pray the third and the sixth hour, followed by lunch. Um, and then everyone again goes back to either having more prayer time in the afternoon, if they have more work that needs to be done. It all depends on the individual. We come together to pray the ninth hour and Vespers at 5 o'clock, followed by dinner, our main meal, and we finish the day with Compline, the night prayer at the church. Um, and after, between Compline and the end of Matins, we maintain the great silence. So there's plenty of quiet time. There was another part to your question. I think that they knew that it was going to happen at some time, that I was going to become a religious of some sort. They were much more pushing me to become a Roman Catholic priest in a parish somewhere so that they would see me much more often. And, but they eventually accepted it. The part about changing from Roman Catholic to Byzantine Catholic, I'll never forget. I took both of my grandmothers to a divine liturgy, and as soon as we walked out, both of them were, that wasn't mass, that wasn't mass. I need to go somewhere else and fulfill my Sunday obligation. I said, hold on a second. If you didn't think it was mass, why did you line up for communion? And you just kind of saw the light bulb come on. But none of them, I think, were overjoyed that I became Byzantine, but they eventually accepted it. So we have liturgy Saturdays and Sundays and feast days. It's just a different tradition. Daily Mass was never part of the tradition in the Eastern churches. It makes it more special. See, it's just a different tradition. So yeah, this past week we had liturgy, I think 5 days, because this was a very feast day heavy week. So. We have 4 different Lents throughout the year. We're in one now. It starts on November 15th until Christmas Day. And for us, we use the term fasting, but it's more abstinence. So during these 4 Lents, and every Wednesday and Friday, we abstain from meat, dairy, fish, eggs, and olive oil. So pretty much every Wednesday and Friday and the 4 different Lenten periods, we keep a vegan diet. The main Lent is 7 weeks prior to Easter. We have one from Pentecost until the Feast of St. Peter and Paul, the end of June, and then the first 2 weeks of August in honor of Our Lady's Dormition, Assumption. Yeah. There you go. Come up after Christmas. We've got a big period between Christmas and Lent this year. Yeah. Hmm. Our monastery uses what's called the revised Julian calendar. So for most of the year, it's the same calendar that you guys are on. So for, for the Feast of Christmas and Epiphany, we're all on the same calendar. But we do use a different calendar to set the date of Easter. So it's the same calendar that the Orthodox churches use. Some Byzantine Catholic churches use the same calendar that you guys for everything, and some Byzantine use what we're on. So the date of Easter can fall on the same date as your calendar, and some weeks it can be a week or two off, up to 5 weeks difference. This past year, it was the longest it could be. Your Easter was the earliest it could be on your calendar, and ours was the latest it could be on our calendar. So there were 5 weeks between the two. This year, next Easter, 2025, we fall on the same date. It's also the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea, which set the formula to set the date of Easter. The Catholics and the Orthodox interpret that council a little bit differently. There's talk that Pope Francis and the Patriarch of Constantinople will be setting a common date for Easter going forward from this year. They're meeting in Nicaea, I forget what month, but sometime in 2025. And there's talk, they both said it, that they're thinking about setting a common date for the Catholic and Orthodox Easter. So we shall wait and see. It would be nice that we will celebrate together.
No, no, we were in communion for centuries after that. Council of Nicaea was 1700 years ago. We had unofficial intercommunion until the Counter Reformation in the 1700s. They often throw around the date 1065 as the dividing point, but at that point it was just really two individuals who excommunicated themselves. There was no real split at that point in time. Well into the 1700s, the Greek Orthodox were inviting Carmelites and Dominicans in to preach retreats because their clergy, because they were under the Ottomans, had very little education. So they would bring in educated Roman Catholics to preach like Lenten retreats and that kind of stuff. It wasn't until the Counter Reformation where Rome kind of lumped the Orthodox in with the Protestants, really out of ignorance, that a definitive break came. Oh, okay. So yeah, Rome has always allowed us to keep our own calendar. We keep our theology is a little bit different, our own spirituality, our own liturgy, because Rome recognizes the ancientness. It stems from the undivided church. They never had an issue with these things. Thankfully, the Holy See kind of leaves us alone. We have our own hierarchy. They're in communion with Rome. They're not under Rome. So the head of our church is it's a major archbishop, and he's in Romania. Um, the only diocese that he has outside of Romania is the diocese here in the U.S. Um, when communism fell, they kind of didn't jump on the bandwagon to open dioceses like throughout Europe, like a lot of the other Byzantine churches. It's like the Ukrainians have dioceses all over the world now, but they are much bigger than our church. Our bishop here in the U.S. does, yes. I usually go as well to assist him with some stuff. But yeah, our archbishop in Romania goes to all of the big meetings in Rome and whatnot. Yeah. Yes, Marianne. Six rights, 26 churches. A church uses a rite. So this morning we had the Latin Rite Mass. At my house, they had the Byzantine Rite Mass. So the rite is how we pray. The organization of churches that are in communion with each other. So you've got the Ukrainian Catholic Church, you've got the Byzantine Catholic Church of America, you've got the Romanian Catholic Church, the Melkite, which are the Byzantine Christians from the Middle East. They're all churches with their own hierarchy. Some of them have patriarchs, some of them are headed by an archbishop. It all depends on the antiquity and the population of what their hierarchy is. And then there's other rites as well, like the Syro-Malabars or the Syro-Malankar from India. Their mass would look very different than yours and very different from ours. It just really an ethnic expression of the liturgy. So they would all have the same parts. I remember the first couple of times I went to Divine Liturgy in Greece, and again, I didn't understand a word of what was going on, but I was able to watch, and I could tell the same parts of the Mass that, we would see here were happening there, but they looked very different. So you could see that there were, the initial prayers at the beginning, and then came the epistle reading and the responsorial psalm. They looked different, and then the deacon would come out with a gospel book and proclaim the gospel. So you could see all these liturgies really are the same at the core, but they're expressed differently. Yeah, someone was probably got carried away and was singing fast. But some of the, yeah. I don't know how to respond to that. Sorry, but that is something I have been trying to work with the choir to slow down. Especially when it comes to reading the Psalms, which is a big part of our liturgical life. They do tend to read a bit quick, yeah. Yes, we will occasionally slip in a little bit of Greek or a little bit of Romanian, a little bit of Ukrainian, but 99% of our liturgy is in English. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. I don't have any particular favorite dishes. I've got two cuisines that consider my favorites, and I do cook a lot. I like rustic Italian cuisine, and I do a lot of cooking. In fact, a couple of my brethren scream that they don't want pasta again, and Cajun Creole cuisines that I did this past week. I made crawfish etouffee. Um, Again, crawfish are not something that we fast from. Shellfish, for some reason, on the Byzantine calendar is not considered fish. It's not considered meat. It's allowed every day of the year. So I think it was for the Feast of St. Nicholas this past week I made crawfish etouffee. I have been working on a cookbook for years. My desire is to do a feasting and fasting cookbook. So encouraging people to observe the traditional fasts as well as how to feast. Because I think most Americans, well, we know how to feast. But the preparation leading up to that feast is often lacking. So that's my idea. Now that I've been given this new job, I have even less time than I had before to devote to it. So I'm trying to get a couple days here and there to sit down and write. Yeah, our prayers are all geared. The responses are all, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. I'm not quite, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about. I, there are a couple of big feast days. The Feast of the Exaltation of the Cross, where we will have 500 Lord have mercies. So it could have been that. But yeah, our responses throughout all of our prayers are Lord have mercy. You know, the deacon starts the liturgy with a litany, and all the responses are Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. And I'm horrible. I've got a horrible voice. You don't want to hear me chant. You heard me chant the gospel earlier. That was. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, the vestments I wore this morning were traditional Byzantine deacon's vestments. Um, the Sticarian, the gold robe that I wore, um, the um, the stole. I'm trying to remember the English word. We call it in Greek. It's called an orarian. The style that I wore today is the style that an archdeacon would wear. So I'm the highest rank of deacon because I'm an abbot. Um, so only an archdeacon would wear that style. Um, and then as part of the vestments, we have cuffs that kind of go around our wrist. Um, the practical reason is to keep our sleeves from getting into the Eucharist. So, You see, the stole comes from the ancient Roman Senate, and the person who had the right to speak would have that stole, and it would be passed around to whoever had the right to speak. And when he spoke, he held it up, and it's like, I'm talking now, because you were in a big basilica full of people, and it was just a way to keep, and that is carried through with the deacon. The hat is basically the Eastern version of the hood that the Carmelites or the Franciscans would have as part of their habit. We do have a veil that goes over the top of it. That in if I was serving in our monastery or in a Byzantine church, I would wear the veil. It's too confusing to people when I come out to a Roman Catholic. So I usually don't. I just wear the hat without the veil. But yeah, it's been Turkified. The 800 years of Turkish domination of the Eastern churches. It's really a form of the fez. That's my office of abbot. In the Byzantine church, priests wear a pectoral cross. In the Western church, it's only bishops that do. But the priests do. And there's a funny story that why priests do. It's a couple of hundred years ago. The Russian Tsar went into a monastery, and he asked one of the monks to hear his confession, and the monk wasn't a priest. So he said, I can't. It embarrassed the Tsar. So the Tsar decreed the following day, all priests will now wear crosses. So I wear the cross because I'm the abbot, the head of the monastery. So most monks that are not ordained to the priesthood would not wear a cross, but the cross. So no. In our monastery, guys will come and they still dress as laymen and go by their name for anywhere from 6 months to a year. If at that time they feel that they want to continue and the community is willing to keep them on, they can become a novice. There's a ceremony, it's called a tantring. They get their hair cut, and they're given the habit and a new name at that point. And at that point, while they're novices, they're called brother with their new name. 3 years after that, if you desire, you can make final vows, which are then you're held under for the rest of your life. And at that point, you're called father. In the Byzantine tradition, all monks are called father, whether they're ordained or not, and all nuns are called mother from their final vows. So you've got mothers and fathers, and it's a spiritual motherhood or fatherhood, because one of our jobs as monastics is to give people spiritual direction. So there's very little infrastructure there is on the Camino in Spain. It's got an ancient history, but it's really only since the 1980s that they're redoing it. But the government got behind it, and every village has hostels, and we don't have that on the Wisconsin Way yet. What I did, about 2 weeks before I was going to hit a town, I would call the local priest and say, "Can you put me up in the parish hall, in the rectory, whatever?" I know a number of lay people who have done the same. So it's really a combination of that, camping. I wound up on the Wisconsin Way 2 nights in motels. There's a lot of bed and breakfasts and whatnot, and Airbnbs that are becoming aware of this and they're catering to the pilgrims. There's a company starting up this year that um, he's going to put together groups of 6 or 8 people and ferry their packs and whatnot from spot to spot. He'll make the arrangements on where to stay. It looks like it's going to be a combination of staying in parish facilities, campgrounds, and a couple Airbnbs. But the most people can do at least from Champion to Holy Hill in about 12 or 14 days. I didn't hit any of the big cities. I did as much walking on the rails to trails systems, the Ice Age Trail. Um, there was a lot of road walking on the Wisconsin Way. They, we're doing our best. We have had a travel writer come out and did a step-by-step guidebook for the Wisconsin Way. It's available on Amazon, or our gift shop in the monastery carries it as well. And I used that from Champion to here, and it was spot on. She really did a good job. I didn't get lost once. When I left here and walked to La Crosse, I got lost a few times. No guidebook for that section yet. So. I'll tell you, in the all the years that we've been here now, the first winter was the worst. But no, they loved it. They really enjoyed it, and came to understand. You know, we're in a very small village, less than 800 people, and as soon as it snows, those roads are plowed. You can hear them out there at 3 in the morning salting the roads. So it's never been an issue. And you, like I said, you just put another layer on it. But yeah, no, none of them would go back. I've got 2 monks at the moment are serving in parishes. Um, one of them is discerning whether he wants to remain a monk or just become a parish priest, and the other is the former abbot. Usually, when an abbot retires, they'll go away for a while to let the new guy kind of do his thing without looking over his shoulder. So, yeah. So our former abbot, Abbot Nicholas, is down in Illinois in the parish. Oh, yeah, that was a decision that was made when I was off in Spain walking my Camino. Father Maximus went into panic mode, which he often does, and made the decision he was going to go out and milk cows to bring some money in. And it lasted for a couple of months, but it really was not suited to our lifestyle. We do often, we work very closely with the Roman Catholic parishes right across the street from our monastery. So yeah, often if he needs a sick call made, one of us will go. We did a lot more work in California with the homeless. We had a food bank in the monastery. We would go down to San Bernardino, which was about an hour and a half away, and the local Byzantine parish there cooked once a week for the homeless, and we were very active in that. We always went down on Thanksgiving and cooked, and but I just haven't found a need where we are. or any organizations to work with. We looked into, working, with soup kitchens and whatnot when we first, but there's those needs are being met, like in our area. So we haven't really at this point. You said when you were in Greece that one of the local bishops that brought you to like a library. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like anyone who's exploring things Byzantine to read the Orthodox Church, who are thinking about, the Orthodox Church, and anywhere the author uses the Orthodox Church, you can read into that. The same for the Byzantine Catholic. It's written by Metropolitan Callistos Ware, who was a convert to Orthodoxy and taught Orthodox theology at Oxford. He was a good friend of our monastery until he passed a few years ago. But Metropolitan Callistos Ware, the Orthodox Church. The Way of the Pilgrim. I don't know if anyone has read The Way of the Pilgrim. Can be read on many different levels. Can be read just as a travel, but he was a disabled Russian peasant in the 19th century who traveled around Russia trying to learn how to pray, and the advice he got from different monks and elders along the way. And he writes, again, on so many different levels, very easy, very beginner's introduction to Eastern prayer, but it can be read on a very deep level as well. It's a book that I like to try to read at least once a year, and I always get something different out of it. My plan was, before this Ukrainian war and being elected abbot, was to go to Ukraine and develop that as a walking pilgrimage, the route that he took, and hit all of the sites. And I'm really surprised that no one has done that with all of these other pilgrimage routes that are becoming very popular in Europe and really good for the economy and whatnot. I'm surprised no one did it, because it's such a well-known in both Eastern and Western circles. It's such a well-known book. So I'm hoping, I put the bug in a couple of young guys' ears. So I hope someone takes up the idea. But yeah, that's another fantastic book about Eastern prayer. All right. Shall we end with a prayer? Okay. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, our Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us, save us. Amen. May Almighty God bless you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, now and ever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Thank you for coming today. I appreciate it. Still good. Good. Yeah. stressful.